The morning had started ordinarily enough for Ethan Montgomery Wellington. He'd woken up in the obscenely comfortable king-sized bed in the east wing of the Wellington estate, showered in the marble bathroom that was bigger than most studio apartments, and made his way down to breakfast in the conservatory where the morning light filtered through crystal-clear windows. What he hadn't expected was for his alpha's mother, the formidable Catherine Wellington, to be waiting for him with a look that could freeze lava. "Ethan," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness that immediately put him on guard. "We need to talk." Those 4 words were never good. Ethan had learned that much in the 2 years he'd been with Alexander Wellington, heir to the Wellington fortune and, unfortunately, son to the most controlling alpha woman Ethan had ever met. "Good morning, Catherine," Ethan replied carefully, taking a seat at the breakfast table. He reached for the coffee pot, but Catherine's next words made him freeze mid-pour. "I think it's time we addressed the elephant in the room." Ethan's mind raced. Which elephant? There were so many potential elephants when it came to Catherine Wellington. Was it the fact that she'd accidentally excluded him from the last 3 family photos? The way she constantly introduced him as Alexander's companion, with a pause that could sink ships? Or perhaps the 17 subtle and not-so-subtle hints she'd been dropping about omega fertility treatments? "I'm not sure what you mean," Ethan said, though he had a sinking feeling he knew exactly where this was going. Catherine set down her teacup with a delicate clink that somehow sounded ominous. "You and Alexander have been together for 2 years now. 2 years, and still no pregnancy." There it was. "Catherine, these things take time. The Harrisons' Omega son was pregnant within 6 months. The Ashfords' Omega had twins in the first year. Even the Blackwoods, and their bloodline is notoriously difficult, managed an heir within 18 months. Catherine's eyes were cold as she studied Ethan. "It makes one wonder if perhaps there's a problem." Ethan felt heat rising to his cheeks, a mixture of embarrassment and anger. "Are you seriously suggesting?" "I'm not suggesting anything, dear. I'm stating facts. Alexander needs an heir. The Wellington line must continue. And if you're unable to provide that..." She trailed off, letting the implication hang in the air like a guillotine blade. "I'm not a broodmare," Ethan said, his voice tight. "And Alexander and I are happy." "He doesn't care about..." "Alexander doesn't know what he cares about," Catherine interrupted. "He's blinded by sentiment. But I'm thinking of the family's future. And I'm afraid, dear, that future doesn't include an Omega who can't fulfill his most basic function." The words hit Ethan like a slap. He stood up so quickly his chair scraped against the marble floor. "You can't be serious." "I'm entirely serious. I've already had your things packed. Gerald will escort you out." "You're kicking me out?" "Alexander is in Singapore. He doesn't even know about this. Alexander will understand once I explain the situation. Now, please don't make this more difficult than it needs to be." As if summoned by some invisible bell, Gerald the butler appeared in the doorway, looking deeply uncomfortable. Behind him, Ethan could see 2 members of the household staff with his suitcases. "Madam has requested that I escort you to the gate, Master Ethan," Gerald said quietly, his tone apologetic. "I'm terribly sorry." Ethan looked between Catherine's cold expression and Gerald's sympathetic one, and realized with a sinking feeling that this was actually happening. She was actually throwing him out. Pride warred with panic in Ethan's chest. Part of him wanted to argue, to fight, to call Alexander immediately and tell him what his mother was doing. But another part, the part that had been dealing with Catherine's subtle put-downs and not-so-subtle disapproval for 2 years, just wanted to get out with whatever dignity he had left. "Fine," Ethan said, lifting his chin. "But this isn't over. Alexander will do what's best for the family. He always has." Catherine picked up her teacup again, as if dismissing him entirely. "Gerald, please see him out." The walk down the grand staircase, through the marble foyer, and down the pristine driveway of the Wellington estate was the longest of Ethan's life. Gerald carried one of the suitcases, maintaining a respectful silence until they reached the gates. "For what it's worth, Master Ethan," Gerald said quietly, "I don't agree with Madam's methods. Master Alexander cares for you very much. Not enough to stand up to his mother, Ethan muttered, then immediately felt bad. It wasn't Gerald's fault. Sorry. Thank you for being kind, Gerald. Best of luck to you, sir. I hope things work out. With that, the gates of the Wellington estate closed behind Ethan with a definitive clang, and he was left standing on the sidewalk with 2 suitcases, a designer handbag. He absolutely wasn't giving back the Birkin bag Alexander had bought him, thank you very much, and the remnants of his dignity. For a long moment, Ethan just stood there, trying to process what had just happened. He'd woken up that morning as Ethan Montgomery Wellington, partner to one of the most eligible alphas in the city, living in luxury at the Wellington estate. Now he was just Ethan, standing on a sidewalk, homeless. The absurdity of it all hit him, and he felt a laugh bubble up in his throat. It came out slightly hysterical, causing a passing jogger to give him a worried look. Ethan pulled out his phone and dialed the one person who would understand. Jamie's phone of friendship and emotional support. How may I direct your call? His best friend answered cheerfully. Jamie, you won't believe what just happened. There was a pause, during which Jamie clearly picked up on Ethan's tone. Oh God, what did she do? Did you finally snap and tell Alexander's mom that her lip filler migrated to her earlobes? Despite everything, Ethan felt a genuine laugh escape. What? No. Though now that you mention it, you're not wrong about the filler situation. But no, Jamie. She kicked me out. She what? Jamie's voice went up about 3 octaves. Like, metaphorically kicked you out of a conversation or literally kicked me out of the estate. I'm standing on the sidewalk right now with my suitcases like some kind of Victorian orphan. I'm coming to get you right now. Don't move. Actually, move to somewhere with a bench. You shouldn't be standing in your condition. My condition? I'm not elderly, Jamie. You're emotionally devastated. That's a condition. Find a bench. 20 minutes later, Jamie pulled up in his slightly beat-up sedan, took one look at Ethan's face, and immediately got out to pull him into a hug. She's a monster, Jamie declared. An actual monster. We're going to put itching powder in her face cream. We're not doing that, Ethan said, but he appreciated the sentiment. Fine, but we're definitely doing something. Get in. We're going to my place, you're going to tell me everything, and then we're going to plot revenge. As Jamie loaded the suitcases into his trunk, Ethan caught sight of his reflection in the car window. He looked tired. His eyes were red from the tears he'd been holding back, and his hair was a mess from running his hands through it nervously. But under the exhaustion and hurt, there was something else. A spark of determination. Catherine Wellington had thrown him out, declared him defective, assumed he wasn't good enough for her precious son. Fine. He'd show her exactly what a defective Omega could do, just as soon as he figured out what that was. Jamie's apartment was a cozy 1-bedroom in a converted warehouse building downtown. It was roughly the size of one of the Wellington estate's walk-in closets, but it had something the estate had never had: warmth. The walls were covered in posters from various concerts and art shows, shelves overflowed with books in no particular order, and there were plants everywhere. Jamie had what he called a minor obsession with keeping green things alive, which Ethan found endearing. Okay, Jamie said, depositing Ethan on the well-worn sofa and wrapping him in what appeared to be a hand-knitted blanket. First things first. Are you okay? And I mean really okay. Not the I'm fine thing you do where you're clearly not fine. Ethan pulled the blanket tighter around himself. Now that the adrenaline was wearing off, he felt exhausted and hollow. I don't know. Still doesn't feel real. Did Catherine Wellington really just kick me out for not getting pregnant fast enough? That's literally what happened, yes. Which is insane, by the way. You're not a vending machine that's supposed to dispense Wellington airs on command. Try telling her that. Jamie disappeared into the kitchen and returned with 2 mugs of hot chocolate. I figure we're past coffee. This is a hot chocolate situation. Ethan took a sip and immediately felt a wave of nausea roll over him. He set the mug down quickly. Ugh, sorry. I think my stomach is still upset from earlier. From the stress of being evicted? Probably. Ethan leaned back against the cushions. I just can't believe Alexander doesn't even know. He's in Singapore for another 2 days, and by the time he gets back, his mother will have already spun this into some story about how I decided to leave. You have to call him. And say what? Hey honey, your mom kicked me out because I'm apparently a defective omega who can't perform his basic biological function. Ethan's voice cracked slightly on the last words. Jamie moved to sit next to him, putting an arm around his shoulders. You are not defective. You know that, right? Catherine Wellington is a controlling nightmare who thinks she can play puppet master with everyone's lives. This isn't about you being defective. It's about her being a terrible person. Then why do I feel so? Ethan trailed off, not sure how to articulate the mix of shame, anger, and hurt swirling in his chest. Because she hit you where it hurts. She knows omega biology and pregnancy are sensitive topics, and she weaponized that against you. It's manipulative and cruel, and Alexander is going to lose his mind when he finds out. Will he though? Ethan asked quietly. He's never stood up to her before. About anything. She picks out his suits. She schedules his appointments. She probably still cuts his food for him. Okay. That last one is probably an exaggeration. Is it though? They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the situation settling over them both. What are you going to do? Jamie asked finally. I don't know. Find a job, I guess. Find a place to live. Figure out my life. Ethan laughed bitterly. You know, all the things I thought I wouldn't have to worry about because I was stupidly in love with an alpha who came with his own trust fund and estate. You can stay here as long as you need to. We'll figure this out together. Jamie, you live in a 1-bedroom apartment. I can't. You can and you will. The couch is surprisingly comfortable, and I've been meaning to have a roommate anyway. Gets lonely sometimes, talking to my plants. Despite everything, Ethan smiled. You're the best friend anyone could ask for. I know. It's both a blessing and a curse. Jamie grabbed the remote. Now we're going to watch terrible reality TV, eat our feelings, and forget about the Wellington family for at least 3 hours. That night, Ethan lay on Jamie's couch, staring at the ceiling and thinking. His phone sat on the coffee table, silent. No calls from Alexander. He was probably in back-to-back meetings in Singapore. No messages from anyone at the estate except a brief, formal text from Gerald confirming that the rest of Ethan's belongings would be shipped to whatever address he provided. It was surreal. 2 years of his life, gone in a single morning. He found himself thinking about the early days with Alexander. They'd met at a charity auction. Cliché, Ethan knew, but it had been genuine. Alexander had been charming and attentive, and unlike other alphas Ethan had dated, he'd actually listened when Ethan talked about his interests, his dreams, his plans for the future that didn't involve just being someone's omega. When had that changed? When had Alexander stopped seeing him as a partner and started seeing him as... what? A future parent for the Wellington heir? Had he always seen him that way? Ethan's stomach churned, and he felt another wave of nausea. Stress, he told himself. It was just stress. But something nagged at the back of his mind. When was his last heat? He usually kept track religiously, but with everything going on, Catherine's increasing pressure about pregnancy, the fertility treatment suggestions, the constant subtle implications that he was failing in his omega duties, he'd been distracted. He grabbed his phone and opened his calendar app, scrolling back through the weeks. 6 weeks. It had been 6 weeks since his last heat. Ethan sat up so fast he nearly fell off the couch. No, that couldn't be right. He was just late. Stress could do that. Catherine Wellington's nightmare behavior could definitely cause enough stress to throw off his cycle. But even as he told himself that, doubt crept in. Because he had been feeling off lately. The fatigue, the nausea, the weird food aversions he'd been attributing to stress. Oh no! Ethan whispered to the empty room. Oh no. The next morning, Ethan found himself standing in the pharmacy aisle at 7 a.m., staring at what appeared to be several hundred different pregnancy test options. Jamie stood next to him, still in his pajamas because Ethan had woken him up at 6:45 a.m. in a panic. Why are there so many options? Ethan hissed, very aware of the elderly woman shopping for antacids 2 aisles over. Don't they all do the same thing? I mean, I assume so? Jamie picked up a box and studied it. This one says early detection. That sounds good. What about this one that says digital display? Is that better? Do I need digital? How should I know? I've never bought a pregnancy test. Well, neither have I. The elderly woman looked over at them with interest. Ethan grabbed the nearest box, he didn't even look at which one, and speed-walked toward the checkout. Smooth, Jamie muttered, following with 2 more boxes because, what if the first one is defective or something? At the checkout counter, the teenage cashier looked supremely uninterested in their purchase, which Ethan appreciated. He paid in cash because God forbid this showed up on any credit card statement that might somehow make its way to Catherine Wellington, and practically ran out of the store. Back at Jamie's apartment, the 3 pregnancy test boxes sat on the bathroom counter like tiny bombs. You have to take one eventually, Jamie said from where he was hovering in the doorway. I know. What if I am pregnant? Then you're pregnant. What if I'm not? Then you're not, and we figure out why you've been feeling sick. What if? Ethan, you're spiraling. Take the test. Ethan picked up one of the boxes and read the instructions 3 times, even though they were fairly straightforward. His hands were shaking. Do you want me to leave? Jamie asked. No. Stay. I need moral support. Okay, but I'm not going to watch you pee. That's where I draw the friendship line. Despite his anxiety, Ethan laughed. Fair enough. 5 minutes later, he'd taken the test and set it on the counter. According to the box, he needed to wait 3 minutes. 3 minutes had never felt so long. Ethan and Jamie sat on the bathroom floor, backs against the wall, staring at the test like it might suddenly sprout legs and run away. What are you going to do if it's positive? Jamie asked quietly. I don't know. Call Alexander? Though that's a fun conversation. Hey, remember how your mom kicked me out for not being able to get pregnant? Plot twist. The irony is pretty spectacular. The irony is that I'm potentially pregnant and homeless. You're not homeless. You have me. I can't raise a baby in your 1-bedroom apartment, Jamie. You can barely fit all your plants in here. We'd make it work. It would be like those sitcoms where unlikely roommates band together and, this is my actual life. Not a sitcom. Jamie's phone timer went off. He'd set it because Ethan had been too nervous to trust himself to keep time. They both stared at the test sitting on the counter. I can't look, Ethan said. You look. This is your test. You're my best friend. Best friend duties include looking at pregnancy tests, right? I think best friend duties are more like helping you move or pretending to like your bad cooking, not interpreting life-changing medical results. Jamie, please. I can't look. With a sigh, Jamie got up and grabbed the test. He looked at it and his eyes went wide. What? Ethan scrambled to his feet. What does it say? Wordlessly, Jamie turned the test around. 2 pink lines. Positive. For a moment, Ethan just stared at it, his brain refusing to process what he was seeing. Then reality crashed over him like a wave. I'm pregnant, he whispered. You're pregnant, Jamie confirmed. With Alexander Wellington's baby. Yes. The baby his mother said I couldn't have. The very same. Ethan started laughing. It was slightly hysterical, bordering on unhinged. But he couldn't help it. The absurdity of the situation was just too much. Oh my God, he gasped between laughs. Oh my God. This is insane. Catherine Wellington kicked me out because she thought I couldn't get pregnant. And I'm literally pregnant. What are you going to do? Jamie asked, though he was smiling too, caught up in the ridiculous irony of it all. I have no idea. Ethan was laughing so hard now that tears were streaming down his face. This is the most ridiculous thing that's ever happened to anyone. I should call her. Hey, Catherine. Remember how you said I was defective? Well, there's a tiny Wellington currently under construction in my uterus. So joke's on you. Okay, maybe we don't call her. But we should call a doctor. Right? Doctor. Yes. That's the logical next step. Ethan took a deep breath, trying to calm down. And then, I guess I have to tell Alexander. Have you heard from him at all? Ethan checked his phone. There was a message from Alexander that had come in an hour ago. Alexander. Good morning. Singapore is exhausting but productive. How are things at home? Miss you. Ethan stared at the message. Alexander had no idea. He was in Singapore, probably in some high-rise office, drinking expensive coffee and talking about quarterly reports, completely unaware that his mother had thrown out his Omega and that said Omega was currently having a minor breakdown in a pharmacy bathroom. Well, technically Jamie's bathroom now, but still. I can't tell him over text, Ethan said. This isn't a text conversation. So call him. And say what? Hey honey, your mother kicked me out 2 days ago. I'm currently living on Jamie's couch, and oh by the way, I'm pregnant. I mean, when you put it that way, this is a disaster. This is an actual disaster. Ethan slid down the wall to sit on the floor again. I'm pregnant, Jamie. There's a baby. A tiny person who's going to depend on me for everything. And I don't even have a place to live or a job or… Hey, breathe. Jamie sat down next to him. One thing at a time. First, we make you a doctor's appointment to confirm and make sure everything's okay. Then you figure out what you want to do about Alexander and his nightmare family. Okay? Ethan nodded, taking deep breaths. Okay. One thing at a time. Good. Now, I'm going to make breakfast, and you're going to eat something that isn't ice cream or existential dread. Can I have toast? You can have whatever you want. You're growing a human. As Jamie headed to the kitchen, Ethan sat on the bathroom floor, staring at the positive pregnancy test in his hand. Despite the chaos and uncertainty and absolute ridiculousness of the situation, he felt a tiny flutter of something that might have been joy. He was going to be a parent. Now he just had to figure out how to tell the father. Dr. Sarah Chun had been Ethan's physician for 5 years. She was a calm, no-nonsense Omega specialist who had seen Ethan through everything from heat cycles to the flu, and she was exactly the kind of steady presence he needed right now. So, she said, looking at Ethan over her tablet, the blood test confirms it. You're pregnant about 6 weeks along. Congratulations. Ethan felt the words settle over him like a blanket. He'd known, of course, the home pregnancy tests had been pretty clear, but hearing it from a doctor made it real in a way it hadn't been before. Everything looks healthy? He asked nervously. Everything looks perfect. Your hormone levels are exactly where they should be for 6 weeks. Would you like to see the ultrasound? Ethan nodded, not trusting himself to speak. Jamie, who had insisted on coming to the appointment, squeezed his hand. Dr. Chun turned the screen toward them and pointed to a tiny flickering spot. There's the heartbeat. Ethan stared at the screen, at the tiny blob that didn't look like much of anything but was apparently his baby, and felt tears start to roll down his cheeks. That's my baby, he whispered. That's your baby, Dr. Chun confirmed gently. About the size of a lentil right now. Jamie was crying too, Ethan noticed. It's so small, Jamie said. Look how small it is. Dr. Chun smiled. She'd probably seen this reaction 1,000 times, but there was genuine warmth in her expression. The baby will grow quickly now. I'll want to see you back in 4 weeks for another checkup. In the meantime, I'm prescribing prenatal vitamins and some anti-nausea medication if you need it. She printed out a copy of the ultrasound and handed it to Ethan. Do you have any questions? Ethan had about 1 million questions, but he started with the most pressing. Is it safe to… given that I'm currently living with my friend and not in the most stable situation. He trailed off, not sure how to articulate his concerns. Dr. Chen's expression softened. Pregnancy doesn't require perfect circumstances. Ethan. Yes, reducing stress is ideal, but babies have been born in all sorts of situations. What's most important is that you take care of yourself. Eat well, take your vitamins, and try not to worry too much. Try not to worry, Ethan repeated. Right? That should be easy. Given that the father doesn't know I'm pregnant, his mother threw me out, and I have no job or permanent housing. The father doesn't know? Dr. Chun asked carefully. It's complicated. It's a nightmare, Jamie interjected. His alpha's mother is a villain from a soap opera. I see. Dr. Chun made a note on her tablet. Well, I would recommend telling the father sooner rather than later, especially if you want him involved. But that's ultimately your decision, Ethan. This is your pregnancy, your body, your choice about who you tell and when. Ethan nodded, clutching the ultrasound printout. His choice, right? After the appointment, Jamie took him to lunch at a small cafe near the medical center. Ethan ordered soup and crackers, the only things that didn't make his stomach turn, and tried to process everything. "You're really quiet," Jamie observed. "Are you okay?" "I'm pregnant," Ethan said, as if testing out the words. "I'm actually really pregnant." "You are? With Alexander Wellington's baby?" "Yep. The baby his mother said I couldn't have." The irony remains spectacular. Ethan pulled out the ultrasound picture and stared at it. The tiny blob with its flickering heartbeat. His baby. His and Alexander's. "I have to tell him," Ethan said quietly. "Do you want to call him?" "No. This isn't a phone conversation. He's back from Singapore tomorrow, right?" Ethan pulled out his phone and checked Alexander's last message. "Yeah, his flight lands at 3 p.m. Are you going to go to the estate?" "God, no. I'm not setting foot in that place again. Not with Catherine there." Ethan thought for a moment. "Can he come to your apartment?" "Of course. It's not exactly impressive, but..." "Jamie, I don't care about impressive. I just need somewhere neutral to tell my alpha that he's going to be a father, and also that his mother is a nightmare who kicked me out." "Fair point." Ethan sent a text to Alexander. "We need to talk. Can you come to Jamie's apartment tomorrow when you land? It's important." The response came a few minutes later. "Is everything okay? You're worrying me." Ethan typed and deleted several responses before settling on, "Everything's fine. We just need to talk in person." Not entirely true, but he couldn't exactly drop the pregnancy bomb over text. That night, lying on Jamie's couch and staring at the ceiling, Ethan tried to imagine how the conversation would go. Best case scenario. Alexander would be thrilled, would apologize profusely for his mother's behavior, would immediately move Ethan into his penthouse apartment, the one Catherine didn't have a key to, and they'd live happily ever after. Worst case scenario. Alexander would side with his mother, would suggest that maybe Ethan was lying about the pregnancy to get back into the family's good graces, and Ethan would end up raising a baby on his own while working 3 jobs to make ends meet. Reality would probably be somewhere in the middle. Ethan knew Alexander was a good person, but he was also completely under his mother's thumb. Standing up to Catherine Wellington would require a spine that Ethan wasn't sure Alexander had. His phone buzzed with another message from Alexander. "I'm taking the first flight I can get tomorrow morning. I'll be at Jamie's by noon. Whatever's going on, we'll figure it out together." Despite everything, Ethan felt a flutter of hope. Maybe Alexander would surprise him. Maybe he'd finally stand up to his mother. Maybe everything would actually be okay. Or maybe Ethan was delusional from pregnancy hormones and exhaustion. Either way, tomorrow would tell. Alexander Wellington arrived at Jamie's apartment at 11:47 a.m., looking like he'd run the entire way from the airport. His usually immaculate hair was disheveled, his tie was askew, and he had the expression of someone who'd spent the entire flight catastrophizing about what could possibly be so important that his Omega needed to talk to him in person. Jamie opened the door, took one look at Alexander's face and said, "He's fine. He's on the couch. I'm going to make myself scarce." "Jamie, you don't have to..." Ethan started, but Jamie was already grabbing his jacket. "I'm going to visit the plant store. I'll be back in an hour. Maybe 2. Maybe 3. Jamie looked at Alexander. "Whatever happened, whatever is happening, I want you to know that if you hurt him, I know people." "You know people?" Alexander repeated. "Vague people. Dangerous people. People who can do things." "Jamie, you work at a library. A library with very strict late fees and no mercy." With that, Jamie left, closing the door behind him with more force than necessary. Ethan and Alexander stared at each other across the small apartment. Alexander broke the silence first. "Ethan, what's going on? Your messages have been so strange. And when I talked to my mother, she said..." He stopped. "What did she tell you? What did she tell you?" Ethan countered. She said you'd decided to take some time apart, that you needed space to think about your future and our relationship. Alexander stepped closer. But that doesn't sound like you. You would have talked to me first. And why are you at Jamie's? Why aren't you at the estate? Alexander, sit down. I don't want to sit down. I want to know what's happening. Did something happen? Did I do something wrong? Because I've been going over everything in my head, and I can't figure out. Your mother kicked me out. The words hung in the air like smoke. Alexander's expression went from confused to shocked to angry in the span of about 3 seconds. She what? 3 days ago, while you were in Singapore. She told me that I was defective because I hadn't gotten pregnant yet, that I was wasting your time and the Wellington line needed an heir, and then she had Gerald escort me off the property. Ethan's voice was surprisingly steady, considering the storm of emotions swirling in his chest. Alexander looked like he'd been physically struck. He sat down heavily on Jamie's armchair, all the color draining from his face. That's... She wouldn't. She did. Ask Gerald if you don't believe me. I believe you. Alexander ran his hands through his hair, making it even messier. God, Ethan, I'm so sorry. I had no idea. She told me you'd decided to leave, that you wanted space, and I should give you time to think. I thought maybe you were tired of waiting for me to propose or something. I thought maybe I'd done something wrong. You did do something wrong, Ethan said quietly. Alexander looked up at him, pain clear in his eyes. You let her control everything, Ethan continued. For 2 years, Alexander. 2 years of her subtle digs about my omega status, her helpful suggestions about fertility treatments, her pointed comments about the Wellington line. And you never once stood up for me. I know. You're right. I should have set boundaries with her years ago. She's my mother, and she's always been controlling, and I thought if I just kept the peace. You can't keep the peace with someone who sees me as defective breeding stock. I know. Alexander stood up, agitated. I know, and I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Ethan. I should have protected you. I should have told her to back off. I should have done a lot of things differently. They stared at each other, 2 years of unspoken tension finally bubbling to the surface. I'm pregnant, Ethan said. For the second time in as many minutes, Alexander looked like he'd been hit by a truck. You're... what? Pregnant. 6 weeks along. I found out yesterday. Went to the doctor this morning to confirm. Ethan pulled out the ultrasound picture he'd been carrying in his pocket and handed it to Alexander. So your mother kicked me out for not being able to provide an heir, but plot twist. There's literally a Wellington heir right here. Alexander stared at the ultrasound picture like it was written in a foreign language. His hands were shaking. This is... our baby? Our baby. We're having a baby. Yes. I'm going to be a father. Eventually, yes. Alexander looked up from the picture, and Ethan was startled to see tears streaming down his face. We're having a baby, he repeated, his voice breaking. Before Ethan could respond, Alexander crossed the small living room and pulled him into a hug so tight it was almost painful. We're having a baby, he said into Ethan's hair. Oh my God, we're having a baby. Despite his anger and hurt, Ethan felt himself soften slightly. This was the Alexander he'd fallen in love with, the one who was genuine and emotional and cared deeply about the people in his life. Yes, we are, Ethan said. But Alexander, we need to talk about your mother. Alexander pulled back, wiping his eyes. I'm going to handle it. Right now. Today. She kicked out my pregnant Omega, the mother of my child, and she's going to answer for that. Alexander. No, Ethan. You were right. I should have stood up to her years ago, and I didn't. But this ends now. I'm not letting her drive you away or control our lives anymore. This is our baby, our family, and she doesn't get to dictate how we live our lives. Ethan had heard Alexander make similar declarations before, usually followed by him caving to whatever Catherine wanted. But there was something different in his expression now. A determination that Ethan hadn't seen before. What are you going to do? Ethan asked carefully. I'm going to go to the estate, and I'm going to tell my mother exactly what I think of her behavior. And then you and I are going to move into my penthouse, The one she doesn't have a key to, and we're gonna start planning for our baby. Just like that. Just like that. Alexander took Ethan's hands. I know I've let you down. I know I should have done this years ago. But I'm doing it now. I'm choosing you. I'm choosing our family. And if my mother can't respect that, then she can deal with the consequences. Ethan wanted to believe him. God, he wanted to believe him so badly. Alexander, if you're going to stand up to her, I'm coming with you. You don't have to. Yes, I do. She kicked me out. She called me defective. I deserve to see her face when she finds out she was wrong. Alexander smiled, a bit of his usual humor creeping back. You want to watch me confront my mother? I really, really do. Okay then. Let's go tell Catherine Wellington that she's about to be a grandmother. The drive to the Wellington estate was tense. Alexander gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles were white, while Ethan sat in the passenger seat trying to mentally prepare himself for round 2 with Catherine Wellington. You don't have to do this, Alexander said for the 3rd time. I can handle her. I want to be there, Ethan replied for the 3rd time. Besides, I want to see her face. Fair enough. They pulled up to the estate gates, which opened automatically. Alexander's car was always granted immediate access. As they drove up the long, tree-lined driveway, Ethan felt a strange sense of déjà vu. Just 3 days ago, he'd been walking down this same driveway with his suitcases, convinced he'd never see this place again. Now he was back, pregnant with the Wellington heir, about to watch his alpha confront the woman who'd thrown him out. If this wasn't the plot of a dramatic novel, Ethan didn't know what was. Gerald met them at the door, his expression carefully neutral except for a brief flicker of something. Relief? Satisfaction. When he saw Ethan. Master Alexander, Master Ethan. Madam is in the drawing room. Thank you, Gerald, Alexander said. Then, quieter. Sorry about the scene that's about to happen. Gerald's lips twitched slightly. I assure you, sir, I've witnessed far more dramatic scenes in this household. I shall endeavor to be elsewhere. They found Catherine in the drawing room, having afternoon tea like she hadn't recently destroyed Ethan's life. She looked up as they entered, and her expression shifted from pleasant to confused to annoyed in rapid succession. Alexander, darling, you're back early. I didn't expect you until this evening. Her eyes landed on Ethan, and her mouth tightened. And you've brought him. His name is Ethan, Alexander said, his voice cold in a way Ethan had never heard before. Your son-in-law, the Omega you threw out of our home 3 days ago. Catherine set down her teacup with deliberate care. I see he's been telling tales. Alexander, I was merely trying to what exactly? Destroy my relationship? Drive away the person I love? I was thinking of the family. The Wellington line needs an heir, and she gestured dismissively at Ethan, clearly wasn't capable of providing one. I'm pregnant, Ethan said, unable to help himself. The look on Catherine's face was going to sustain him for years. Catherine's expression froze. You're, what? Pregnant? Ethan repeated, enjoying himself now. 6 weeks along. Doctor confirmed it this morning. There's a heartbeat and everything. So about me being defective and incapable of providing an heir. Catherine's face went through a fascinating series of expressions. Shock, disbelief, calculation, and finally something that might have been triumph. Well, that's wonderful news. See, Alexander? Everything worked out. Once the Omega comes back to the estate, we can begin proper prenatal care and— No, Alexander said firmly. Catherine blinked. I'm sorry. I said no. Ethan isn't coming back to the estate. We're moving into my penthouse in the city. Don't be ridiculous. The Wellington heir needs to be raised at the Wellington estate. It's tradition. The Wellington heir will be raised by their parents, wherever we decide to live. And mother, Alexander's voice could have cut glass. You're going to apologize to Ethan, right now. A real apology, not one of your non-apology apologies. Catherine looked like she'd been asked to eat glass. Alexander, I don't care what you think. You threw out my Omega, my pregnant omega, because you were too impatient and controlling to let things happen naturally. You called him defective. You made him feel like he wasn't good enough. And you're going to apologize for all of it, or…" He paused. "You're not going to be part of this baby's life." The silence that followed was deafening. Ethan had never, in 2 years of knowing the Wellington family, heard Alexander speak to his mother like this. He'd never heard Alexander set a boundary, make a demand, or issue an ultimatum. Catherine, for her part, looked genuinely shocked. "You wouldn't try me?" Ethan found himself holding his breath. This was it, the moment that would determine everything. Would Catherine apologize? Would Alexander actually follow through on his threat? Fine, Catherine bit out, each word clearly painful for her to say. "Ethan, I apologize for my hasty actions. Perhaps I was premature in my assessment of the situation." It was possibly the worst apology Ethan had ever heard, delivered with all the sincerity of a hostage reading a ransom note. But watching Catherine Wellington have to apologize to him, the omega she deemed defective, was more satisfying than Ethan could have imagined. "And," Alexander prompted. Catherine's jaw tightened. "And you're welcome to return to the estate if you wish. We won't be taking you up on that offer," Ethan said sweetly. "The city sounds lovely, actually. Less oppressive." Alexander squeezed Ethan's hand, probably to stop him from rubbing salt in the wound, but Ethan caught the slight smile on his face. "We'll be in touch, Mother," Alexander said. "But from now on, there are going to be some changes. No more dropping by unannounced. No more making decisions about our lives without consulting us. And no more disparaging comments about Ethan's omega status or our relationship. Are we clear?" "Perfectly," Catherine said through gritted teeth. As they left the drawing room, Ethan could feel Catherine's eyes boring into his back. But he didn't care. For the first time since this whole nightmare had started, he felt like maybe, just maybe, everything might actually work out. In the car, Alexander let out a breath he'd apparently been holding. "I can't believe I just did that." "You stood up to your mother," Ethan said, still slightly in shock himself. "You actually stood up to her." "I should have done it years ago." "Yeah, you should have. But you did it now, and that counts for something." Alexander reached over and took Ethan's hand. "I'm sorry it took this long. I'm sorry I let her treat you that way. And I'm sorry she hurt you. I'm sorry I didn't tell you how bad it was getting. I thought I could handle it. We're both sorry. Let's agree to communicate better from now on." Ethan smiled. "Deal. Now, can we please go to your penthouse? I'm exhausted, and your child is apparently making me crave pickles." "Pickles? Really? Pregnancy is weird, Alexander. Get used to it." As they drove away from the Wellington estate, Ethan looked back at the imposing mansion in the rearview mirror. He'd thought his life was ending when Catherine had thrown him out. Turned out it was just beginning. Alexander's penthouse was exactly as Ethan remembered it. Spacious, modern, and decorated with all the personality of a high-end hotel room. The floor-to-ceiling windows offered a stunning view of the city. The kitchen was full of top-of-the-line appliances that probably had never been used, and the entire place screamed, "Wealthy bachelor who is never home." "I know it's not very homey," Alexander said, watching Ethan explore, "but we can change that. We can change anything you want." Ethan opened the refrigerator and found it even more depressing than he'd expected. One bottle of wine, a container of takeout that looked like it might be achieving sentience, and absolutely nothing else. "Alexander, this is the saddest fridge I've ever seen. I usually eat out." "You can't eat out for every meal when you have a baby. Babies need nutrients and routine. And…" Ethan trailed off, suddenly overwhelmed. "Oh God, we're having a baby. A tiny person who's going to need us for everything. Do you know anything about babies?" Alexander looked panicked. "I know they're small. That's your entire knowledge base? That babies are small? I mean, I can learn. We can take classes. There are books." Alexander pulled out his phone. "I'm ordering books right now. And groceries. What do you need? What do pregnant omegas eat?" "Food, Alexander. We eat food. What kind of food? Ethan couldn't help but laugh at the genuine panic on Alexander's face. Okay. How about we start simple? I need crackers, ginger ale, and pickles. Lots of pickles. What kind of pickles? I don't know. Just pickles. 20 minutes later, Alexander had ordered enough groceries to feed a small army, including 15 different kinds of pickles because he wasn't sure which ones you'd like. This is insane, Ethan said, scrolling through the order confirmation. We don't need 15 jars of pickles. You said you were craving pickles. I want to make sure you have options. Options for what? Opening a pickle emporium? Despite the absurdity, Ethan felt something warm blooming in his chest. Alexander was trying. He was overwhelmed and clearly had no idea what he was doing. But he was trying. Thank you, Ethan said softly. For buying too many pickles? For everything. For standing up to your mother. For choosing us. Alexander pulled him close, careful not to squeeze too hard. I should have chosen us a long time ago. But I'm choosing us now, and I'm not going to stop. They spent the rest of the afternoon making the penthouse feel more like home. Ethan hung up the ultrasound picture on the fridge, the first personal touch in the entire sterile kitchen. Alexander ordered furniture for the spare bedroom that would eventually become the nursery. They argued good-naturedly about baby names. Alexander wanted something traditional. Ethan wanted something that wouldn't make their child sound like they're from the 1800s. When Jamie showed up at dinner time with Thai food and an expectant expression, they filled him in on everything that had happened. You actually told her off? Jamie asked Alexander, looking impressed. Like, actually told Catherine Wellington that she couldn't control your life anymore? I did. And you threatened to keep her from the baby if she didn't apologize? I did that too. Jamie turned to Ethan. I'm sorry I ever doubted him. To be fair, I also doubted him, Ethan admitted. I deserved the doubt, Alexander said. But I'm going to do better. Starting with, he looked around the penthouse. Making this place an actual home instead of a hotel room I occasionally sleep in. Over the next few weeks, that's exactly what they did. The sterile penthouse slowly transformed into something that felt lived in and loved. They painted the nursery a soft yellow, gender-neutral. Ethan had insisted. They bought actual groceries and learned to cook meals together, or rather, Ethan cooked while Alexander provided moral support and occasionally chopped vegetables. Ethan's morning sickness, which was actually all-day sickness, was rough, but Alexander was there for all of it. Holding his hair back, bringing him ginger ale, learning which foods would and wouldn't trigger nausea. Jamie visited constantly, each time bringing some new baby item he'd found. Look at these tiny shoes, he'd exclaim, holding up booties the size of his thumb. They're so small. The baby isn't even here yet, Ethan would point out. I'm preparing. I'm going to be the best uncle ever. You're the only uncle, which makes me the best by default. Alexander found this endlessly amusing, while Ethan found it endearing if slightly excessive. But they bought the tiny shoes anyway, and the tiny hats, and the tiny everything that Jamie kept bringing over. Work-wise, Ethan had started an online consulting business. Turns out, being kicked out by a nightmare mother-in-law had given him the motivation to prove he was more than just Alexander Wellington's Omega. The business was actually taking off, which was both exciting and terrifying. You don't have to work if you don't want to, Alexander said one evening, watching Ethan type away on his laptop. I want to work. I like working. Besides, setting a good example for our child about Omega independence and all that. Fair point. Just don't overdo it. Okay? Says the alpha who works 12-hour days. That's different. How is that different? I'm not growing a human inside me? Weak excuse, Wellington. Things with Catherine remained tense. She'd called several times, each conversation awkward and stilted. She wanted to be involved with the baby but didn't quite know how to navigate the new boundaries Alexander had set. She's trying, Alexander said after one particularly awkward phone call. In her own controlling, boundary-pushing way. I know. I guess that's something. Do you think you'll ever forgive her? Ethan thought about it. Maybe. Eventually. But she's going to have to earn it. And Alexander. He looked up at his alpha. If she ever tries anything like that again, she won't. And if she does, I'll handle it. I promise. As Ethan's belly grew and the baby became more real with each doctor's appointment, life settled into a new normal. It wasn't perfect. They still had moments of panic about becoming parents, still argued about baby names. They'd narrowed it down to about 15 options, which was progress, and still had to navigate the complicated relationship with Catherine. But it was theirs. Messy and complicated and absolutely nothing like what Ethan had imagined when he'd woken up that Tuesday morning 3 months ago. And somehow it was perfect. At 4 months pregnant, Ethan had finally stopped throwing up everything he ate, which he considered a major victory. His baby bump was clearly visible now, and Alexander had developed an adorable habit of talking to it every morning. "Good morning, baby Wellington," Alexander would say to Ethan's stomach. "Today we're going to learn about market analysis." "The baby can't understand market analysis, Alexander. It's never too early to start their education. They don't even have fully formed ears yet. The parenting books say babies can hear sounds in the womb. Hearing sounds is not the same as understanding corporate finance." This had become their morning routine, and despite Ethan's protests, he found it unbearably cute. Life had settled into something resembling normalcy. Ethan's business was thriving. It turned out that being the Omega who'd been kicked out by the Wellington family and came back pregnant had actually given him a certain notoriety in business circles. Who knew? Alexander had started working from home more often, claiming he wanted to be available for Ethan but really just wanting to be near him and the baby. Ethan didn't mind. It was nice having his alpha around, even if Alexander did hover like Ethan might shatter at any moment. Jamie had basically become a permanent fixture in their lives, showing up at least 3 times a week with new baby acquisitions. "Look at this mobile," he'd announced last week, carrying in an elaborate contraption with tiny planets and stars. "It's space-themed. Your baby can learn about the cosmos while developing their visual tracking skills." "Jamie, they're not even born yet. Preparation is key, Ethan." Catherine had been surprisingly quiet, limiting her contact to weekly phone calls where she asked polite questions about the pregnancy and managed to only be subtly controlling about half the time. Progress, Alexander called it. So when Catherine invited them to a dinner party at the estate, just a small gathering, nothing major, Ethan's first instinct was to refuse. "Come on," Alexander had cajoled. "She's been trying, and it's for a good cause. She's raising money for that Omega Health charity. The charity is fine. Your mother's dinner parties are nightmares. I'll be with you the whole time, and we can leave whenever you want. Promise. Promise." Which was how Ethan found himself back at the Wellington estate on a Saturday evening, wearing one of the few formal outfits that still fit over his growing belly, trying not to have flashbacks to being escorted off the property 4 months ago. "You okay?" Alexander asked, squeezing his hand. "Just memories. We can leave right now if you want." "No, I can do this. It's just dinner." "How bad can it be?" Narrator, it could be very bad. The dinner started normally enough. Catherine greeted them at the door, air-kissed near Ethan's cheeks, and complimented his lovely glow, which Ethan suspected was just sweat from pregnancy, but he'd take it. "So glad you could make it, darling," she said to Alexander. "And Ethan, you're looking well. How is the baby?" "Active," Ethan said, which was true. The baby had started kicking recently, and apparently enjoyed doing gymnastics at 3 a.m. "Wonderful. Come. There are some people I'd like you to meet." The first hour was fine. Ethan made polite small talk with various society couples, accepted congratulations on the pregnancy, and managed not to roll his eyes when people inevitably asked if he was hoping for an alpha. "We're hoping for a healthy baby," he'd reply each time, which was the truth. He and Alexander had decided not to find out the baby's status before birth. They'd love them regardless. Halfway through dinner, Ethan excused himself to use the restroom. Pregnancy meant he had to pee constantly, which was both annoying and unavoidable. On his way back, he overheard voices from the adjacent parlor. "Can't believe Catherine is just accepting this." "Accepting what?" "That Omega raising the Wellington heir." After everything that happened, Ethan froze just outside the doorway. Well, what choice does she have? The Omega got pregnant, and Alexander actually stood up to her for once. Still, it's quite scandalous. Being thrown out and then coming back pregnant? Some might say it seems calculated. Are you suggesting? I'm not suggesting anything. I'm just saying the timing is convenient. Ethan felt heat rising to his face. They were implying he'd gotten pregnant on purpose, to trap Alexander or something equally ridiculous. He should walk away. He should be the bigger person. He walked into the parlor with his best smile. Hi. Sorry to interrupt, but I couldn't help overhearing you discussing me. The two women, society types who Ethan vaguely recognized from other events, went pale. We didn't mean. Oh, I think you meant exactly what you said. You're implying I got pregnant on purpose after being thrown out, right? To trap the wealthy alpha? Ethan's smile got sharper. Let me clarify something. I was already pregnant when Catherine kicked me out. She just didn't bother to wait and find out before declaring me defective. We didn't say defective. No, Catherine said that. You're just here gossiping about it, which is so much better. Ethan leaned against the doorframe, channeling every ounce of confidence he possessed. Here's a tip. If you're going to talk about someone, maybe make sure they're not within earshot. Just a thought. He turned and walked away, leaving them stammering behind him. He nearly collided with Alexander in the hallway. Did you just eviscerate Mrs. Harrison and Mrs. Blackwood? Maybe. That was the hottest thing I've ever seen. Ethan laughed despite himself. Your mother is going to kill me. My mother can deal with it. Those women were out of line. But Catherine had other plans. She found them a few minutes later, looking less pleased than she had at the start of the evening. Ethan, dear, perhaps we should discuss appropriate behavior at social gatherings. Appropriate behavior? Ethan's temper, already frayed, snapped. Is it appropriate for your guests to imply I got pregnant on purpose to trap Alexander? They were merely gossiping about me, about your grandchild, in your house at your dinner party. Catherine had the grace to look uncomfortable. Yes, well, you know how society can be. Actually, I don't know, because I'm just a defective Omega who got lucky, right? I never said. You did say that. For months ago, before you kicked me out of my home. The hallway had gone very quiet. Several guests had stopped to watch the drama unfold. Alexander stepped forward. Mother, I think we're going to leave now. Alexander, don't be ridiculous. The evening has barely started, and we're ending it. Ethan's right. Your guests were out of line, and instead of addressing that, you're criticizing him for defending himself. He took Ethan's hand. We'll see you next week for our regular check-in. Come on, Ethan. As they walked toward the exit, Ethan could hear the whispers starting up again. But he didn't care. He was done caring what Catherine's society friends thought of him. In the car, Ethan let out a shaky breath. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have made a scene. Are you kidding? You were amazing. Standing up for yourself, for our family. Ethan, I'm proud of you. Your mother probably hates me even more now. My mother needs to learn that actions have consequences. And her friends need to learn some basic manners. Alexander reached over to squeeze his hand. You okay? Yeah, just tired. And the baby is doing gymnastics, which is not helpful right now. Let's go home. We can order food, watch terrible TV, and forget about society drama for a while. Best idea you've had all day. When they got home, Jamie was waiting outside their building with Thai food and a knowing expression. I heard about the dinner party disaster, he said without preamble. How did you already hear about it? It ended 20 minutes ago. I have my sources. Also, Mrs. Harrison's Omega assistant is my yoga buddy, and they were live texting me the whole thing. Jamie held up the takeout bags. I brought comfort food and validation. You're the best friend ever. I know. Now let's go inside so you can tell me exactly what you said to those horrible women. I want every detail. As they ate Thai food and Ethan recounted the evening's events, with Jamie cheering at all the right moments, Alexander's phone buzzed with a text from his mother. She wants to have lunch next week to discuss appropriate boundaries at social events. Alexander read. Is she serious right now? Ethan asked. Apparently. I'm going to tell her that her guests are the ones who need to learn about appropriate boundaries. Don't antagonize her too much. She's still your mother. She called you defective and kicked you out while you were pregnant with her grandchild. I think I can antagonize her a little bit. Jamie raised his spring roll. I'll drink to that. Or eat to that. You know what I mean. Despite the disaster of the evening, Ethan found himself smiling. Yes, society was still gossiping about them. Yes, Catherine was still being difficult. Yes, everything was complicated and messy. But he had Alexander, who was finally standing up for their family. He had Jamie, who brought comfort food and unconditional support. And he had a baby doing gymnastics in his belly, blissfully unaware of all the drama. It wasn't perfect, but it was theirs. At 7 months pregnant, Ethan was officially huge. Or, as Alexander diplomatically put it, gloriously round with our child. I'm the size of a house, Ethan said, staring at himself in the mirror. You're beautiful. I can't see my feet. Your feet are also beautiful. You have to say that. You did this to me. Alexander came up behind him, wrapping his arms around Ethan's considerable belly. And I'm very proud of my work. Look at this. You're growing our baby in there. That's amazing. I'm also growing out of all my clothes at an alarming rate. I had to buy new pajamas yesterday because my stomach kept escaping from the old ones. We'll buy more pajamas. That's your solution to everything. Just buy things. I'm a Wellington. Purchasing solutions is literally in our DNA. Despite the discomfort, Ethan couldn't help but smile. The baby chose that moment to kick hard enough that Alexander could feel it. Whoa! Was that? That was your child practicing their martial arts routine. They've been doing this all morning. Alexander's face lit up with that expression he got every time the baby moved. Pure wonder and joy. He dropped to his knees and put his face near Ethan's belly. Hello in there. This is your father. Could you maybe go easy on your dad? He's working very hard growing you. The baby kicked again as if in response. I think they're saying no, Ethan said. Already stubborn. They're definitely yours. Excuse me, have you met your family? Stubbornness is a Wellington trait. They'd finally settled on a name. Emma Rose for a girl, James Alexander for a boy. It had only taken 6 months of debate, countless lists, and one memorable argument where they'd almost named their child TBD, just to end the discussion. The nursery was finished, decorated in soft yellows and greens with constellation decals on the ceiling. Jamie's contribution. They had a crib, a changing table, more tiny clothes than any baby could possibly wear, and approximately 7,000 parenting books that Ethan had been reading obsessively. I don't think we're ready, Ethan said one evening, surrounded by said books. No one is ever ready, Alexander replied, looking up from the baby monitor he was attempting to set up. That's not comforting. It's honest, though. Jamie had started coming over even more frequently, if that was possible. He'd announced that he was taking 2 weeks off when the baby arrived to help, but really just to spend time with his niece or nephew. I'm going to teach them everything, Jamie had declared. Art, music, literature, how to make a proper cup of tea. They're going to be a newborn, Jamie. They're not going to care about tea. It's never too early to develop refined tastes. Work had slowed down as Ethan's due date approached. He'd taken on a few contract projects he could complete from home, but mostly he was preparing for the baby's arrival and trying not to panic about becoming a parent. Catherine had been better. Not great, but better. She'd apologized again for the dinner party incident and had actually started respecting the boundaries Alexander had set. She called once a week, asked about the baby, and managed to keep her controlling tendencies to a minimum. I think becoming a grandmother is softening her, Alexander observed after one particularly pleasant phone call. Let's not go that far. But she's definitely trying. It's weird, right? My mother actually trying to be considerate. Extremely weird. I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop. 2 weeks before Ethan's due date, They had their final baby preparedness class. It had been Alexander's idea to take the classes, and Ethan had to admit they'd been helpful. Even if some of the other couples had given them strange looks, being the Omega who got kicked out and came back pregnant had apparently made them minor celebrities in prenatal class circles. Remember, the instructor said, babies come on their own schedule. Your due date is just an estimate. So make sure your bags are packed and you're ready to go at any moment. Our bags have been packed for 3 weeks, Alexander whispered to Ethan. You packed them 3 weeks ago. You've also checked them 17 times to make sure we have everything. Preparedness is important. That night, Ethan woke up at 2 a.m. with cramps. Not terrible ones, but enough to make him uncomfortable. Alexander. He shook his alpha awake. Alexander, I think. Alexander shot up like he'd been electrocuted. Is it time? Are you in labor? Where are the bags? Why can't I remember where the bags are? The bags are by the door where they've been for 3 weeks. Calm down. You calm down. I am calm. You're the one panicking. The cramps got worse. They called the doctor, who told them to come to the hospital to be checked. The drive to the hospital was surreal. This was it. After months of preparation, panic, and planning, they were actually going to meet their baby. I can't believe this is happening, Alexander said, gripping the steering wheel. Believe it, because this baby is coming whether we're ready or not. They arrived at the hospital at 3 a.m. The contractions were irregular but definitely real. The doctor checked Ethan and delivered the news. He was in early labor. Could be hours, could be longer, the doctor said. First babies like to take their time. Hours, Ethan repeated weakly. Sometimes longer. Let's get you settled in a room. The next 12 hours were a blur of contractions, breathing exercises, Alexander holding his hand, and possibly losing circulation in said hand from Ethan's grip, and Jamie showing up with an overnight bag because, I'm not missing this for the world. You're supposed to be at work, Ethan pointed out between contractions. Called in sick. Family emergency. You know, because you're having a baby. That's not a family emergency. It is to me. Through the haze of pain and exhaustion, Ethan noticed Alexander was handling this remarkably well. He didn't panic when Ethan yelled at him. Only twice. He didn't faint when things got intense. He stayed calm, supportive, and present. You're doing amazing, Alexander kept saying. You're so strong. You've got this. I really don't got this, Ethan gasped. This is terrible. Why do people do this more than once? You're doing great. I love you so much. I love you too. But if you ever try to get me pregnant again, I'm divorcing you. We're not married yet. Then I'm preemptively divorcing you. Jamie, standing in the corner and filming everything, with Ethan's reluctant permission, was definitely crying. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the doctor said the words Ethan had been both dreading and longing to hear. It's time to push. At 4:47 p.m., after 12 hours of labor, Emma Rose Wellington entered the world crying at the top of her tiny lungs. She was perfect. 7 pounds, 4 ounces of absolute perfection, with Alexander's nose, Ethan's eyes, or so they claimed. She was very squinty, and an impressive set of lungs that she immediately put to use. Oh my God! Ethan breathed as the doctor placed Emma on his chest. Oh my God! She's here. She's actually here. She's perfect, Alexander said, tears streaming down his face. Ethan, she's perfect. You're perfect. I can't believe she's ours. We made a person. Emma stopped crying long enough to blink up at them, her tiny face scrunched in what might have been confusion about suddenly existing outside the womb. Hello, Emma, Ethan whispered. We've been waiting for you. She gripped his finger with surprising strength, and Ethan felt his heart expand in a way he hadn't known was possible. This was his daughter. His and Alexander's daughter. Jamie, still filming, was openly sobbing. She's so small. Look how small she is. After the medical staff had checked Emma over and declared her perfectly healthy, they gave her back to Ethan, who couldn't stop staring at her. We made a person, he said to Alexander. We made the best person. She's not even an hour old yet. Still the best person. Over the next few hours, they made phone calls to announce Emma's arrival. Ethan's parents cried happy tears. Alexander's father called to offer congratulations and promises to visit soon. Catherine arrived within an hour, looking uncharacteristically nervous. "May I see her?" she asked quietly from the doorway. Alexander looked at Ethan, who nodded. "Come in, Catherine." She approached slowly, her usual confidence replaced by something that looked almost like vulnerability. When she got close enough to see Emma, properly sleeping in Ethan's arms, her entire expression softened in a way Ethan had never seen before. "She's beautiful," Catherine whispered. May I hold her?" Ethan handed Emma over carefully, watching as Catherine cradled her granddaughter with surprising gentleness. "Hello, Emma Rose," Catherine said softly. "I'm your grandmother. I have a lot to learn about being a good grandmother, but I promise I'm going to try. You're going to teach me so much." It wasn't forgiveness, not entirely, but it was a start, a genuine start. Alexander slipped his hand into Ethan's, and they watched Catherine with their daughter. This woman who had caused so much pain but was clearly trying to do better. "Thank you," Catherine said quietly, looking at Ethan, "for giving me a chance to be part of her life. I know I don't deserve it after how I treated you, but thank you. Just don't kick me out again," Ethan said, only half joking. "Never. I promise." Catherine looked back down at Emma. "Besides, this little one wouldn't let me. Would you, darling? You're going to keep your grandmother in line." After Catherine left, with promises to visit again tomorrow and to call before coming, which was progress, Ethan and Alexander were finally alone with their daughter. Well, alone except for Jamie, who had taken approximately 7,000 photos and was now curled up in the uncomfortable hospital chair, asleep. "We're parents," Ethan said wonderingly. "We're parents," Alexander confirmed. "How do you feel?" "Exhausted, overwhelmed, terrified, happy. So happy." Emma made a small noise, and both of them immediately went on high alert. "Is she okay? Does she need something? Should we call the nurse?" "Alexander, she's fine. She's just making baby noises." "Are baby noises normal?" "I think so. The books mentioned baby noises." "Should we check the books to be sure?" Ethan laughed, exhausted and delirious and more in love than he'd ever been. "We're going to be those parents, aren't we? The ones who panic about everything." "Probably." "Good. I'd be worried if we weren't worried." As the evening turned to night, they took turns holding Emma, marveling at her tiny fingers and tiny toes and tiny everything. She was so small, so fragile, so utterly dependent on them. "We're going to mess this up sometimes," Ethan said quietly. "Definitely. But we're going to love her. So much. So much." Emma yawned, a tiny perfect yawn, and both of her parents immediately took pictures. Epilogue. 6 months later, and everything is perfectly imperfect. Emma's half-birthday party was Jamie's idea. Ethan had pointed out that half-birthdays weren't really a thing people celebrated. But Jamie had insisted that every milestone deserved recognition, and now they had a small gathering at the penthouse. "She's 6 months old," Jamie had declared. "That's a big deal. She's halfway to 1. That's technically true, but we're having a party. I'm making a cake. Don't argue with me." So they had a party. Catherine was there, actually sitting on the floor next to Emma's playmat and making silly faces that were absolutely not dignified for a Wellington but made Emma laugh her adorable baby laugh. "I never thought I'd see the day," Jamie whispered to Ethan, watching Catherine play peekaboo. "I know. It's weird, right? Extremely weird, but also kind of nice." "Yeah, kind of nice." Emma had turned into an absolute delight of a baby. She was smiley and curious, just starting to sit up on her own, and had Alexander completely wrapped around her tiny finger. "Who's the cutest baby in the world?" Alexander cooed at her. "You are. Yes, you are. You've become one of those parents," Ethan observed. "I know. I don't even care." Work was going well for both of them. Ethan's consulting business was thriving. Turns out, Being able to work from home while watching a baby was actually possible with the right schedule and a lot of coffee. Alexander had started working from home more too, claiming it was to maintain work-life balance, but really just wanting to spend more time with Emma. Their relationship with Catherine had improved significantly. She still had her controlling moments, but she respected boundaries now. She called before visiting, didn't make disparaging comments about omegas, and had actually apologized, genuinely apologized, several more times for how she treated Ethan. "I was wrong," she'd said last month, during one of her visits, "about so many things, about omega rights, about what matters in life, about you. And I'm sorry. It wasn't perfect, but it was real, and that counted for something." As Ethan watched his strange little family, Alexander trying to convince Emma to eat mashed sweet potatoes while she blew raspberries at him, Jamie taking approximately 7 million photos, Catherine offering actually helpful advice about babies. He couldn't help but think about how much had changed in a year. A year ago, he'd been thrown out of the Wellington estate, declared defective, told he wasn't good enough. Now he was here, successful, happy, surrounded by people who loved him, with a daughter who was perfect in every way. "What are you thinking about?" Alexander asked, coming over with Emma in his arms. She immediately reached for Ethan, making her little grabby hands. "Just everything. How much has changed?" "Good changes. Mostly good changes. Some weird changes. Catherine playing peekaboo will never not be weird." Alexander laughed, shifting Emma so she could grab Ethan's hair, her new favorite activity. "True. But weird good. Weird good." Emma let out a squeal of delight and pulled Ethan's hair. "Ow! Emma, that's attached to my head." "She's very strong," Alexander said proudly. "Takes after her dad." "Which one?" "Both." Later that evening, after the party had ended and Jamie had left with leftover cake and promises to babysit anytime they needed, Ethan sat in the nursery's rocking chair with Emma. She was almost asleep, her eyes drooping as she fought to stay awake. "Let me tell you a story," Ethan said softly. "Once upon a time, there was an omega who got thrown out by his alpha's family because they didn't think he was good enough. But plot twist, he was already pregnant with their heir. And you know what? That omega built a whole new life. And he was happy. And he had the most perfect daughter in the world." Emma's eyes finally closed. "The end?" Ethan whispered. "And they all lived messily ever after." Alexander appeared in the doorway, watching them with that soft expression he got whenever he saw Ethan with Emma. "She asleep. Finally. I think the party wore her out. Let's get her in the crib, and then we can actually relax for 5 minutes before she wakes up again." They worked together to settle Emma in her crib, a process they perfected over the past 6 months. She sighed but didn't wake, which they counted as a victory. In their bedroom, Ethan collapsed onto the bed with a groan. "Parenting is exhausting, but worth it. So worth it." Alexander lay down next to him, pulling him close. "I love you, and I love our weird, complicated, perfect little family. I love you too, even though your mother tried to ruin my life. She's trying to be better. She really is. It's unsettling. Would you prefer she go back to being terrible?" "No, this is better. Just weird." They lay in comfortable silence for a moment. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if Catherine hadn't kicked you out?" Alexander asked. "Sometimes. I probably wouldn't have started my business. We probably wouldn't have moved into the penthouse. We might not have figured out all the communication issues we were having. So in a weird way, getting kicked out was the best thing that could have happened. Don't tell your mother that though. She doesn't need the ego boost." Alexander laughed. "Deal." Emma started fussing from the nursery. "I've got it," Ethan said, already getting up. "I'll make you tea. You're perfect." "I'm really not, but I'm trying." As Ethan went to comfort Emma and Alexander headed to the kitchen, the penthouse filled with the sounds of their life. A baby crying, footsteps on hardwood floors, the kettle starting to boil, soft voices soothing and comforting. It wasn't the life Ethan had imagined a year ago. It was better, messy and complicated and absolutely nothing like a fairy tale. but it was theirs and that made it perfect. The end. Author's note. Thank you for reading. Remember, the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's living well, establishing healthy boundaries, and building a life that makes you happy. Also, pregnancy cravings are real and valid. Society's opinions don't matter as much as your own happiness. And sometimes the people who hurt you can actually grow and change, though you're under no obligation to let them back into your life if they do. Special thanks to all the Jamies out there who show up with comfort food and unconditional support. You're the real MVPs. And to anyone dealing with difficult in-laws, boundaries are healthy. Standing up for yourself is important, and you deserve to be treated with respect. May all your pickle cravings be satisfied and all your alpha partners learn to stand up to their nightmare parents.